Hello, everyone. This is Christina Barr, and you're watching Black Tea News. Hello. Welcome to Black Tea News. I'm your host, and today we're going to be talking about revisiting the Kyle Rittenhouse case. Again, I just wrote a piece out today on blacktnews.com, so make sure that you guys are, sharing things around, that you're following me on my social media pages. They're all at Black Tea News on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. The only one that's different is at Twitter, which that one is at True Black Tea. But I just dropped a good article today, so you guys can share that around. I'm going to be talking about it a bit today, but you can go ahead and read it because I'm not going to go exactly through the whole thing. And I word things out differently when I obviously type them up. But it's a good article to share that talks about the Rittenhouse case and why it was surrounding race so much and what we can really learn from critical race theory and how they're trying to use this philosophy, this theory, to really reshape our world. And if you were angry about that case, that's just a foretaste of what they do and what they plan to do. So we're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about Alec Baldwin. He's having a interview with George Stephanopoulos, and they were showing previews of it. And he's claiming, I've not talked about the Alec Baldwin situation because it seemed, in my opinion, a tragedy. He's being charged. It's like a negligent case. He had a gun on set and he shot it and fired and he killed someone. And so now he's saying that he didn't pull the trigger. Alec Baldwin is saying he didn't pull the trigger, and that seems pretty crazy to me. And my opinion,
it's false. No way. Not this time. We created it. Not this time. No, not this time. It's totally made up. Pure fiction. It's fiction. It's fiction. We made it up. We made this one up. It's a made-up tale. It's a total fabrication. It never happened. It never happened. This one was invented by a writer. Not this time. It never happened. It's false. It never happened. It's a fake. It's fiction. It's an urban legend that never happened. No way. We got you. Not a chance. Not this time. It never happened. It never happened. We made this one up. It's fiction. We made up this one. We made it up. Not this time. Wrong. Not this time. Not this time. You're wrong. Not this time. It never happened.
Yeah, so that's how I feel about the Alec Baldwin thing now. and yeah, so he's got a whole new story going along with it, and which is really fascinating to me because it's very unlikely that gun went off by itself. It's not totally impossible, but it's very, very unlikely. And unless he's like going to pay a lot of people off, I don't see how he's going to get out of that. So that is just a bizarre way to go about things. Also, I was watching TV last night, and there was a really creepy commercial from the Michigan Health and Human Department about COVID, as they're really trying to get your kids vaccinated. So I was like, rewind that back. So I took out my phone and I recorded it, and I want to show you guys the commercial. And also, people are saying that critical race theory, it's not in schools. It's just a thing that crazy Republicans and crazy paranoid parents are saying. But the superintendent of Detroit public schools definitely said that, he said that they do use critical race theory. So there's activists who are totally bought in, and most people who are lying to you, like Joy Reid and so on, they still buy into it. They just know that it's bad politically. And so they want to lie about what's actually in the schools. But some people are really crazy devoted activists, and they will be honest. So I have a little clip of that. I did post that last night. Just evidence. They're admitting it. And of course, people are still having meltdowns about the hearings yesterday at the Supreme Court regarding the Mississippi case, which could perhaps start the dismantling of Roe v. Wade. You guys know my position. I would really, really love if that happened, especially if that could be the legacy that Clarence Thomas leaves behind on the court. But I just don't want to give my hopes up, but I do hope that it's gone with this case. But before we jump into everything, I do want to encourage you guys to go to my website, blacktnews.com. Again, the article we're going to be covering today is one that I just dropped. So if you want to see good content and share that around, please make sure that you're visiting the website, you're sharing those things around, that you're following me on all my social media accounts. All my handles are pretty much at Black T News. Make sure that you check out different merchandise that I have on the website, like the My Money, My Business stuff. I got the little, cute mugs, got t-shirts, all sorts of things. Also, you guys know that I do write books and so on for this is a chapter book series. I got stuff for kids, young adults, new adult, historical fiction, fantasy, contemporary fantasy, romance, paranormal romance. I do have faith books and all sorts of things. So you can go to blacktnews.com and see what kind of merchandise that I have. And if you appreciate what I do here at Black T News, especially inform you guys on like critical race theory and other things like that, please consider leaving a donation at blacktnews.com/donate. Okay, so before we jump into it, I do have a comic book today. Well, not a comic book, but just a comic from G Prime 85, one of my favorite people on Twitter. And this comic book, the context, there's someone running away and they're saying, stop, he's escaping from the voluntary quarantine facility. And there's this person in the background who's just, doing selfies and stuff. And then she looks behind her and she sees that they're chasing this poor man. So a little background, Australia has gone insane, absolutely insane. So they do have these quarantine camps. And Tim Pool, who's not on the right, I do enjoy listening to Tim Pool. He's definitely not on the left. He's just a critical thinker, pretty interesting guy. And a guy who's, he's not always right. I don't always agree with him, but he does have integrity and is really open to having conversations and stuff. So anyway, he's been talking quite a bit about Australia and the sort of things that are going on there. People mocked him for calling them concentration camps. There was this big thing on Instagram where people had a hashtag and they were just posting selfies of themselves in like bikinis, like, oh, we're having such fun on lockdown. And then this story pops out where there's 3 people escaping the voluntary quarantine camps. So there was actually a news story. I'm going to play a bit of it from Australia. But yeah, people are escaping the voluntary camps. They don't sound like they're voluntary, especially when you have the military going and rounding up people and bringing them there. But that's where we're at in the world.
Good morning. We start with breaking news out of Darwin, where 3 people have escaped from the Howard Springs COVID quarantine facility. Talia Sava's there for us. Talia, good morning. There's a search underway right now.
Yes, that's right, Davina. Good morning to you. We've been told the trio scaled the fence in the early hours of this morning. Police receiving reports around 4:40 a.m. Now, major police checkpoints have been set up around Howard Springs for the past several hours. As you can see in these pictures, they've been conducting thorough searches in car boots, checking vehicle registrations, cars and buses alike. But in the last half an hour, what we understand is they've actually been dismantled. Exactly why, that hasn't been confirmed. Hopefully good news. We're also not sure yet who these people are connected with, whether it's a repatriation flight or those Aboriginal community members who have been staying here following the Catherine cluster. Davina, what we do know is that this is definitely going to bring this gold standard facility under intense scrutiny. On Sunday, we had a man escape and found on Darwin's party precinct, and this latest situation is only going to put us under the microscope further.
Not good news. OK, Talias, thank you.
People are escaping the quarantine camps. It sounds very strange, right? Voluntary. Why would you have to escape from the voluntary camps? So other people are starting to lose their minds with the new variant going around, even though the people in South Africa who discovered it, but apparently they're saying that it actually started in Europe, and then they're the ones who like made it a thing, and then it was named, and it's already here in America. So, I mean, people flipping out trying to stop it from crossing borders. It's already here. And it's mild from what they can tell. And the doctors in South Africa are like, why are we being punished for simply pointing out that it exists? It's very mild. There's no reason to freak out. Yet we have whisperings or rumblings from, the White House, Biden administration, and other places like they're going to, they're saying they don't want to do lockdowns. I doubt they'd really want to do them during Christmas time. I imagine Christmas is why they are backing off with the laying off more government workers and stuff uh, with the vaccine mandates, as the private sector and healthcare sector and stuff started pausing the mandates and beating Biden in the courts. Biden unleashed a memo saying, hey, we're going to pump the brakes on that. So a lot of these choices obviously aren't for our safety. They're for political reasons. So I don't know what they will have to gain from doing the lockdowns right now, unless they want to continue it on through, I don't know, election time. It doesn't make sense to me why they would do that, but I wouldn't put it past them in predicting this, but they can definitely still try to force other things. They're not doing a lot of things that make sense. Even, of course, the mandates and stuff haven't made sense, and it's just I think they're trapped in their little weird power grab that they have. Speaking of weirdness, we know, and we've covered this extensively, that the COVID, well, in general, isn't a huge risk to your children, especially in these ages they're trying to push you to get vaccinated. We talked about Eric Swalwell the other day and his hysterical tweet saying, my kids 5 and under don't have a choice, and you guys got to take care of them and by getting vaccinated and so on. And we went through the data, went through the numbers on the CDC, and we're just like, here, the numbers are very small for deaths from the entire pandemic of people in this age range dying. As a matter of fact, flu is still like more dangerous, suffocation's more dangerous. Kids, are more likely to die in a car accident, yet you still drive them. So if you're hysterical and you have a child and you think they're going to get COVID and die, that's just not reasonable. But anyway, yesterday I was over my mom's house, my mom and dad's house, and she's watching TV. I was getting ready to go, actually. And then I saw a commercial from our Michigan Health Department play, and I was like, run that back. Because I'm like, that seems like some propaganda. So here's the commercial. I recorded it with my phone. Here it is.
Why do you want to get the COVID-19 vaccine?
I don't like getting sick. The virus will die. It will be easy to not catch it. Keep my family safe and keep playing soccer. Because I love being vaccinated.
What's your hope for everyone?
I hope everybody gets the vaccine to keep safe and strong. Be like happy, having fun everywhere. Everyone stay safe and hope you get the vaccine.
Yeah, so it was kind of funny because when I was running it back, my mom ran it back too far, and then my sister's like, it's after the rallies commercial, and like she remembered every detail of it. Was a Checkers commercial. We're like, why were you watching that commercial that hard? But anyway, the sort of things that the kids were saying, like it will disappear. Is that really the goal that people have in mind, and why none of this is stopping? Because they have a goal of just we can never go back to normal until it's gone, because it's just not how things work. It's not how things work. So for them saying, so I won't get sick. So yeah, you don't want them to get sick, but also the kids are really, really, really not in danger from COVID. And in my opinion, you can talk to your doctors and so on, but there are risks associated with taking the vaccine. If you are elderly and you have comorbidities, the benefit to getting it probably far outweigh the risk, but that has to be a decision that you make. But for kids, they are pretty much okay. They have nothing to fear. So if people, I found that to be pretty strong propaganda, in my opinion. I don't know if that weirded you guys out a bit. It weirded me out a bit when I saw it. But it'll disappear if everyone gets vaccinated. It's just not going to happen, in my opinion. So that's where we're at. Another weird thing going on in Michigan. People like Joy Reid and so on, who we're going to talk about in a second, are saying things like there's no critical race theory. I was invited to speak at an event, and parents were really concerned about it. And there was another critical race theory expert there who was there talking. I mostly talked about it from like the media angle and the spin, and I did like summarize it. And by the time I had talked, the expert they brought was like, I don't know what else to say. So anyway, I did a good job. But and he was lovely too. But the parents were very concerned about critical race theory, and they really wanted to understand what it was. And they talked to some of the administrators, and they claimed it's not here in the districts. So Detroit is like our biggest, Wayne County is our biggest county, and Detroit is a really big school district. And the superintendent has said that, they have critical race theory.
Our curriculum is deeply using critical race theory, especially in social studies, but you'll find it in English language arts and the other disciplines. We're very intentional about creating a curriculum, infusing materials, and embedding critical race theory within our curriculum.
Yeah, so they are aware of it. It's intentional. They are embedding it, and people like Kimberly Crenshaw have gone on Joy Reid's show and was like, "Well, I would know if it was in schools because I'm one of the people who made it." And yet she will go to events and she'll talk to other teachers, and they'll say, "Well, they have critical race theory insight," so they work it in. And he lets you know it's not just in social studies. They say it's about teaching honest history. That's what they claim, which is a lie. And people who are aware of what it is know that's a lie too. That's just a media spin talking point. It's obviously not about teaching accurate history. So he says it's also in social studies, and they'll work it into other areas that they can too. But FYI, it's probably in your kid's school district somewhere. I can't say that it's everywhere, but to some regard, it's there. I wrote an article. This is also on blacktnews.com, so please go to blacktnews.com. Check out this article too, that explains if these people are devoted to changing the world, the outlook of changing the world, that is their goal. Why would they wait for the chance that your kid graduates high school and then goes to college and then decides to go into being a lawyer and then goes to law school? And then in law school, you learn critical race theory. Why would they risk waiting all of that time to change the world? They would not do that. Are they having your kids read Derek Bell and reading about how integration is bad? And to some degree they might, but not probably like the direct writings of him. But are they teaching them the insights and working it into different things? Absolutely. Is it already in like books and stuff that your kids are reading? Absolutely. Is it out there on the TV shows that they're watching? Yes. I showed you guys a clip of the TV show Arthur, which I used to watch when I was a kid. They had a slamming theme song. It's a wonderful kind of day. I love that theme song. So they brought that back and they updated it and put a lot of woke stuff in it. But there was an episode they were talking about racism. That one character was discriminated against because they were black. I'm like, oh my gosh, what are we gonna do? And Arthur's talking to Buster, like, what are we gonna do? And I'm just like it's so bad that he's treated different because he's black. I'm like, are there humans in this show? Buster's a bunny. Like, I don't know. I don't actually remember what Arthur is. They got monkeys and all kind of stuff in the show. And I'm like, you couldn't just have discrimination between different animals. You had to like bring real life people into this. That's another thing that's so weird about this world today. They think you have to be so on the nose to teach lessons. Like, I wrote an article about the blowback I got about my Blue's Clues video, and so many people were trying to convince me that in order to teach acceptance, that's why we need to have these drag queens on Blue's Clues, and that's why we need to have pansexuals on Blue's Clues, because we're trying to teach kids how to be accepting and loving and kind. I'm just like, y'all couldn't have watched Land Before Time? Because I learned that with dinosaurs when I was a kid. It was very tragic, and Littlefoot's mama died. Spoiler alert. It was a lot to handle. But we did learn those lessons, and it is possible to learn those lessons. As a matter of fact, when I was in high school, we had a creative writing class, and gosh, I wish I had these files because this is a really good book. Everybody loved my book, but I made a book that basically was about those themes, and I used animals and instruments, and like it was an alphabet book. It was slamming. I'll have to remake it. I'm telling you, it was great. Everyone was like, Christina, go last. Read your book last because it's so good. They're like, we don't want to be embarrassed because your book is so good. I spent a lot of time working on it. And we actually went to a preschool and read our books to the kids. So I promise you, you can still teach kids lessons without having to be so on the nose. You don't need drag queens. You don't need pansexuals. You don't need to make the animals real black people. You don't need to do it. But they can't get past their ideology to even make good content. They don't even care about being creative anymore. They just want to indoctrinate your kids. So be mindful of these things that are going on in your kid's school. And they're going to switch from calling it critical race theory to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And if you hear intersectionality stuff, those are things to watch out for too. Kimberly Crenshaw, who I mentioned not too long ago, she's the mother of intersectionality too. So all this dumb leftist stuff really intertwines together. So we got to be on the lookout. For these sort of things, because they're there in your kid's school. So that's something that you got to fight against. And if the more that they push it, we'll be there. So make sure that you are going to your kids' school board meetings and you're confronting these people, because some of these people don't even know what this stuff is. So you guys may know, which I also wrote about this and did a show about it, but you guys can go back and read that article. When I went to a Democrat Party picnic, they did not know I was Republican. I just showed it. Now, I'm not going to say they assumed just because I was black, because I was at the picnic. Why else would, why would you assume I'm a Republican? So, but some people are like, it's because you're black, right? Like, I showed up at their picnic. What else would they think? So anyway, I showed up at their picnic and I'm having conversations, and I was very honest about, like, I didn't just bluntly state my Republican views on things or whatever, but we just had nice normal conversations most of the time. But there were things that people said here and there that concerned me. The most concerning thing was the outlook that they had, that they think people on the right legitimately have no empathy for people, that we don't care about people. And I'm like, that's a pretty harsh, unique, weird thing to say about people, in a whole swath of people. And to what degree? It wasn't just people who were there, who were the activists, who were, meeting the elected officials. It was Bernstein, who's on the Supreme Court, who was like, I like being a Democrat because we actually care. I'm like, whoa, okay. But anyway, they were concerned about Republican uprisings against critical race theory. And then I talked to the Democrat chair and I pushed her. I gave her some solid advice. I was like, is this the hill y'all want to die on? And then she's like, of the people who show up at these things are racist. I'm like, critical race theory is what's racist. And then they admitted they didn't even know much about it and hadn't looked much about it. But Republicans are against it, so they have to push it and be for it. And even after Virginia, you still see people pushing it very hard. Now, people will maybe try to shift it and just say the diversity, inclusion, and equity stuff, which equity is very bad. It's not equality. It's not justice. It's rigging the system to get the outcome that they want. That's what equity is. So be leery of those buzzwords too. Be very leery of them. But they didn't even know what critical race theory was. And granted, there's a lot of Republicans and stuff that cannot, or parents who don't articulate it very well, who maybe haven't looked extraordinarily deeply into the thing. But your instincts are correct. Just go with your instincts. It's bad stuff. But hopefully programs like this inform you guys so you can be armed with this information to go to these places, these school boards, your parent teacher conferences, meetings, and so on, and just say, hey, I don't like these things these are the writings of it. These are the books that my kids are reading, and I want to make sure that you guys are not indoctrinating my kids. because there is a really powerful indoctrination element to it. So I'll get to the Rittenhouse thing in a moment. I do want to touch on the Alec Baldwin thing before I jump into that. But I mean, just really quickly, Alec Baldwin, I have not said much about the Alec Baldwin situation. Because it just seemed like a tragedy on set. Now, the case is about negligence, and George Clooney has said, like, when they give me a gun, you check a gun, and it's in their union rules that people are supposed to check that stuff thoroughly, and obviously that's not the case with this. Alec Baldwin is saying that the bullet wasn't supposed to be there and that he didn't even pull the trigger. So according to the union, like, so he didn't check that there's a bullet in there? And he's saying he didn't point it, and he said he wouldn't shoot it, and he's saying now that I would never point a gun at someone. I would never do that, like, and pull the trigger. So now it's getting to this really bizarre story, and like I didn't like when Donald Trump Jr. like was making fun of it. I'm like, this is a really tragic thing that happened, and but now it's getting to a really weird place, and sounds like obviously like a cover up. And he's going on talking with George Stephanopoulos, and the part of the interview he was like bursting into tears, and he's like, your emotions are very raw. I'm just like, maybe he's also an actor. I don't know. But this story is really bizarre. So here's a little clip, and I'm playing this from Newsmax because ABC is sometimes weird. I don't want them to flag me. So here's Newsmax talking about it. They probably will flag me, but they'll just want credit in the video. So
it wasn't in the script for the trigger to be pulled.
Well, the trigger wasn't pulled. I didn't pull the trigger.
So you never pulled the trigger?
No. I would never point a gun at anyone and pull a trigger at them. Never.
What did you think happened? How did a real bullet get on that set?
I have no idea. Someone put a live bullet in a gun, a bullet that wasn't even supposed to be on the property.
Wait, whoa. He didn't pull the trigger. Now, I've been around guns for a long time. I worked with the National Rifle Association, for crying out loud. They don't go off by themselves. He was using a revolver, an old cowboy-style revolver, that the easiest way to fire is if you cock the hammer. And even then, you have to pull the trigger. And if you don't have the hammer cocked, you really have to pull those triggers, right? It doesn't work, what he's saying here. And again, he already apologized for this. This is the first interview, apparently, that Baldwin has done since the shooting, and apparently Baldwin is now refusing to take any responsibility for it. Wow.
Yeah, so this is getting to a bizarre place. So I'm gonna probably follow this more and talk about it because like I said before, I was just like, this is a tragedy, but now you're saying you didn't even point the gun. There wasn't supposed to be a bullet in there, which means you didn't check it then. And so you're admitting some negligence there, right? Because it's according to your union rules, you are supposed to check those things thoroughly. So, which I bet there's a lot of people who don't do those things on set because there's just so much going around on those sets, and it would probably depend from which set to which set how much they really pay attention to the rules that the unions are supposed to make sure are in place. So, I don't know what they're trying to spin, but actors are really amazing. I mean, you had Jussie Smollett, who actually, who's on trial, he could just get like probation, but he could get jail time for a few years for his big hate hoax, claiming that he got attacked in Chicago by some Trump supporters wearing MAGA hats in a polar vortex. And one thing that was pretty funny that came out during the trial is that he actually did a dry run with his attackers that he paid. They didn't even find white guys. They're like these big Nigerian, I don't remember if they're Nigerian, but there's big hulking black dudes to do this hate crime. and they're doing the dry run, and the dry run is captured on surveillance camera. So that's hysterical, but how could they think that they could get away with this? And so I just brought that up to say, Alec, I mean, I'd assume that this was just a horrible accident, and perhaps he will be held accountable for negligence. But now it's spinning into a conspiracy theory that the bullet wasn't supposed to be there. So somebody would put it in there to set someone up. Did you read that off a QAnon website? Because I have seen those conspiracy theories that someone wanted to kill the woman and then they set Alec Baldwin up. So I don't know if he's running down that rabbit hole, hoping someone else will follow it and that'll be the story. But that just seems so much of a reach. Who would believe that? Who would? Maybe other people on the left, maybe people who don't know a lot about guns. It's not saying it's not impossible for you to set you could set down a gun and maybe it will go off or something. But that is not believable. So I don't know what he's doing. I don't know what he's doing. Again, I just stayed out of it because it seemed like a tragedy. But this is bizarre, really bizarre, really bizarre. One other thing I do want to briefly mention before I get to the Rittenhouse thing. Well, I do want to thank Brighter Michigan PAC for being in the studio, and we've been talking about local issues like critical race theory and stuff. I'm in Michigan. It's a Brighter Michigan PAC. You can still support if you live outside of state, but you do need to support organizations and people who do want to help with people who run for things like school board and so on, and these maybe smaller races that maybe bigger groups don't think about participating in so much, but local politics really matter. So anyway, I appreciate being in the studio. If I said something that triggered you, they don't care. I don't care. It doesn't work like that. I'm just using the space, and I do appreciate everything that they do to elect good candidates. So yesterday, the Supreme Court heard arguments regarding the Mississippi case where they're trying to ban abortion at 15 weeks, and it didn't seem like really the pro-abortion side had much of a good argument because they know that Roe v. Wade is just really, really bad law. So you had the justices who asked some really good questions, and we did talk about it a bit yesterday. I played a few things yesterday, and I know a lot of people are covering it. But I wanted to talk about some of the outrage that's coming from the left. And I saw Whoopi Goldberg, she was on The View talking about men, how dare they, blah, blah, blah. You can't be impregnated. So, which isn't that kind of transphobic now? I thought men could get pregnant. So what we were like, switching what we believe at our whims, but that's what they do. But I hate when women say that because that is their progeny. They're just supposed to shut up about women killing their kids. So obviously I hate that. And it's gotta be bigger than just about you. What if you like, just to say my body, my choice, which there's another body involved. You're just totally being delusional and ignoring the fact that there's someone else involved. And I heard Matt Walsh talk about liberal justices and making the case that they say it's not a good standard to assume just because of fetal pain, or that's a measurement of when life is, or that's a detection of life. But it's like, well, when do you guys think that life is? Because you guys don't know. When Obama ran for president, he said that's above my pay grade. Yet he still believed in abortion when Democrats were trying to pass a bill. Republicans were trying to pass a bill that would ban abortion if the reason was you didn't want to have a child of a specific sex. So it was a gender discrimination abortion bill, and it ended up failing. I don't know if they were just trying to pass anything that got through that had to deal with abortion, and it ended up failing. And so Jake Tapper, he wasn't at CNN at the time, but he did ask Obama, the White House, how they felt about it, and they said they were glad that it failed because they still were for the right to choose. It's like, you're right for the choose whether they are going to specifically kill a woman. That's what you guys are standing for. But Obama, when he ran, he said, that's above my pay grade. If it's above your pay grade, why not err on the side of caution and not terminate the life? If you're not sure it's a life, why? I heard Matt Walsh say it's like throwing a grenade into a room and not knowing if anyone is there. So why not? If you don't know, maybe you disagree that it's at conception. The conception is the most consistent standard because that is when the process begins, right? If you leave it alone, the natural process is birth. I mean, it's coming out one way or another, and most of the time, it's going to come out as a healthy, normal human being. The only force that enters into, no one's forcing you to have the baby, but the only force is if you decide to have an abortion. So conception is a very consistent standard for the right. Where you don't have to be on the right, just pro-life. But where's the consistent standard for the left? Because if it's viability, that shifts as that can shift which hospital you're at and as technology advances. So if you're saying it's at 21 weeks because that's viability, which again, to me, that doesn't even make any sense to me, because what does viability matter? Because it's still inside the woman. So if you're saying, well, it can survive outside the womb, but it's not outside the womb, it's still inside the woman. So what does it matter? What does it matter? I don't think viability makes sense at all. So they don't really have good arguments. They just have, maybe they have compelling reasons where a woman is in a really bad situation, and you can make it make sense, or you can make it sound compelling. But at the end of the day, it still is a life, and they have to wiggle all the way around it, twist themselves into pretzels to try to avoid that fact. They'll call it a clump of cells, they'll call it a parasite, which those things are not even scientifically accurate in the manner of how a fetal development is, but that's the route that they go with. So I wanted to bring attention this tweet. My Walsh engaged with them a little bit when I was on his page, and I saw this writer who's written for BuzzFeed and other stuff like that. But he said, I'm not hearing enough from dudes who were saved from an unwanted fatherhood because their partner was able to have an abortion. Fellas, we should be shouting as loud as our partners, mothers, sisters, and friends right now. And what I mean is, women already have to shoulder the burden of abortions. Don't make women shoulder all the burden of fighting for the right to have them. This is our fight too. Also, you Christians have been lied to. And he had an article that was, Jesus never said anything about abortion. Which, by the way, I hate when pro-choice people try to bring up the Bible with their argument, especially because they don't follow it. And then they bring up the dumbest things that don't make any sense. I don't know how many times I've had to have conversations about Numbers 11 because people have convinced themselves that passage is about priests giving abortions to women, and it's just not true. And people say life starts at first breath because God breathed breath into Adam and he became alive. I'm like, he wasn't conceived. Just shut up. And I never bring up religion, especially like on TikTok where I've had a lot of conversations with people. I don't bring up religion in the abortion conversation because they don't appeal to that authority. So why would I expect them to? And I don't need to. It's a life at conception, therefore its right to be protected. Boom. I don't need to bring up God into it. I don't need to bring up Christianity. But I'll read his article and attack that another day. But this idea that he's saying I'm not hearing enough from dudes who were saved from an unwanted fatherhood because their partner was able to have an abortion. This is horrific. This is absolutely horrific. My youngest sister called me about maybe a week or two ago, and she had one of her employees. Well, there was someone that she knew. Well, I kind of said it. There was a coworker who was going to have an abortion, and she had just found out she was pregnant, and my sister tried to convince her not to. I actually don't know what happened afterwards, but she didn't get to talk to me. I think when she first called me, I was probably doing my show and I was busy doing other things. So I didn't talk to her later. So she felt the burden of not being able to convince this girl who is young and was partying and did stuff that she knew that she shouldn't have. And so my sister just felt such a burden, such grief, because she's like, what if I could have done something? What if I could have said the right thing? And I've felt that too. I was having a conversation with somebody who was like, I'm going to have one tomorrow. And I'm like, and I don't know what happened to her either. I'm like, I think you told me that because you want someone to convince you not to do it. And so we went back and forth a bit online, and I don't know what she ultimately ended up doing, but it is what they ultimately decide to do. But she told my sister that the person who knocked her up gave her the money to go get it. And it was just kind of callous. Like, oh, here's the money, There's it. And so even though she was the one still going to do it, she was upset at the man for having such a nonchalant, go take care of it sort of opinion. So she said, I'll probably never talk to him again. But we are raising a generation of men where they don't see the value in fatherhood, the value in responsibility, the value of having a progeny and building some kind of legacy and continuing on the world. And it's about YOLO, live your life, full of any sort of obligation. And to the point where you have men that could throw a couple dollars at a woman and say, go take care of it. And this isn't the vibe that this man is trying to give off, I think, but that's the vibe that's the sort of thing that he's promoting, that he's protecting. And then he goes on to the second, section of his tweet and says, that women have to shoulder the burden, so we should at least be the ones on the front lines, I guess, fighting with them, so they don't have to at least fight for it alone. But why don't you fight instead together for life, for your relationship? The problem is that there's so many people today, so many young women, I've said this before, they engage in relationships with people who don't want to build anything with them. So yeah, you're with a guy, and sometimes these women are coerced into it by a man who doesn't want it. Sometimes they're in an abusive relationship. Sometimes they're with a husband who's abusive, and I've heard women feel that they felt that they had to get an abortion because they couldn't protect another baby. Those things are monstrous. And in a situation like that, I can understand a woman deciding to do that. But again, we have an industry that protects abusive men, abusive and irresponsible men. And for him to be just on Twitter like, yeah, we need to stand up so we can keep letting these women kill our children. It's weak. It's perverse. You're not worthy of the title of being a man. And it's just so creepy and it's just so gross. Why can't you encourage the woman? I know there's people who don't want kids. I know, but there's people who can't have kids who do want kids. So you can't even hold it out for 9 months. There was a beautiful story about a family. They knew that their child was not going to live outside of the womb very long. So instead of having an abortion, they decided that they would live their life to the fullest with their baby inside of them. So they decided to go on all these like hiking trips and mountains and stuff. I think that maybe they went to Mount Everest, if I'm not mistaken, but they called it the Ember Tour. And they asked the pro-life community to send them artwork, and they put it all over their walls in the delivery room. So when this child was born, it wasn't born in a dark, cold room. It was in a room full of people who loved them, full around with all this beautiful support from the world. And the family, it was a little girl, and she was surrounded by her mom, her dad, and her brothers, and she died peacefully. So they still decided to live that little bit of life to the fullest, carrying that child for 9 months, knowing that it wouldn't make it. But it was still worth something. That life was still worth something. And you have guys like this who are like, we don't want to be fathers, so we got to fight for abortion so our mates can kill our kids. That's the world we live in. So I don't know what else to say about it. Oh gosh. I don't know what else to say about it, but it's sick. It's sick, and he's not alone. He's not alone, and I can tell you, Anthony Tubin, but Tubin, the guy on CNN who's a legal analyst, he's the one who got suspended briefly for pleasuring himself on a Zoom call, and he fiddled around with someone who he had an affair, and he wanted them to have an abortion to cover up his misdeeds. So, and so many times when pro-choice men will argue with me, they'll say the most heinous things to me. One time someone told me that they want to scrape my eggs out with a hanger. So a lot of this pro-choice men, it's not about supporting women, and I'm not saying that some of them aren't supporting women because they think that's what the woman needs. I'm not saying all of them are like that, but a lot of it is abusive. It's to cover up abuse. So man up. Man up, protect your children. I know you can love your woman all day long, but let her know that you're willing to be there for her. Let her know that. So let's finally get to this article about the Rittenhouse. So people have wondered why people have been so obsessed with race the whole entire time with this case. Like, why were they comparing it to the Aubrey case? Why did Business Insider put out an article that said, well, both white juries that are deciding the fate? Like, they're in different states, they have different like demographics. Kenosha's super white. It's not weird that there was like a jury of 11 white people and one Hispanic person. That's not weird in Kenosha, and that doesn't mean that the facts would bear out something different. The facts were still the facts, and hopefully if it was an all-black jury, which would have been very weird in Kenosha, I hope they still would have come to the same conclusion, because the facts were still the same, and he should have really never been charged. I wrote an article on blacktnews.com about some of the weird stuff that went on in that case anyway. If you haven't read it, please check it out. So a lot of it, the whole case was pretty political anyway, but the weird thing about the Rittenhouse situation is that so many people focused on race too, so much to the point where my dad told me, after reading my article that corrected the record on a lot of stuff, he said, I thought he killed black people. And my dad doesn't consume left-wing media of Joy Reid and so on. That's just what the media at large was making people feel. And people didn't understand why. And why there's so many conversations regarding race. It's not that Kyle did anything wrong. Kyle didn't do anything wrong. The jury found that out. It was not particularly heroic that he just went there to, and it's a nice thing and heroic thing, I think, that he was trying to protect other people's businesses and help people along those lines. The fact that he defended his life, that's just something I think that most people would do, period. And he had the right to do that. He had the right to carry that firearm. He had just as much the right to be there than everybody else who was there. He wasn't committing any crimes. Those people chased him down. They hurt him. He only killed people who were trying to kill him. Case closed. But people really try to make it about race. Why? Because he was there trying to protect property of brown people, actually, even though they lied about it on the stand, which didn't make sense. We'll see if they get committed for perjury, prosecuted for perjury, which I'm sure they won't. So he was there to help them, and they resented that because there was a riot going on, and it was a BLM riot. Now, these people who were there, Mr. Huber, Grosskretz, and Rosenbaum, they were not some kind of big BLM activists. That's not why they were there, because they had such a love of black people. As a matter of fact, Rosenbaum just left a mental institution. He's the one who fiddles around with the kids. And Joy Reid had the nerve, and in the article, if you go on the website, I do have these links on the website of when she was eulogizing these people, and she compared them to a famous abolitionist. And it's like, that's not why they were there. They weren't there to protect black people. That's not why they were there, to defend black people for the sake of Jacob Blake. They were there to riot and mess stuff up. Now, people felt righteous in their, because you gave them a complex about the riots being the language of the unheard, and people were saying that over and over again. And even though you had businesses being burned down, some of them from minorities, people didn't care because they had cover because of the sort of rhetoric people were saying. And even if people got arrested, you had people like Kamala Harris who were encouraging these people to get out, and you had these left-wing prosecutors and stuff who would let people out. So people weren't even facing repercussions for their action. Even people who were charged for stuff in certain areas, they're still not really being held accountable for the craziness that went on. So last summer is just like, it's just insane, all the things that happened. But Kyle was there, and he wasn't on the side of the BLM narrative. It's not that the people who Kyle shot were such upstanding citizens. As a matter of fact, if anyone deserved it out of the bunch, I mean, it was a justified shooting regardless, but I can't believe people are like crying and saying affectionate things about a guy who diddled with children. It doesn't make any sense to me, but that's how their ideology blinds them. So before the verdict was read, Joy Reid was on her show after Kyle cried on the stand, and she mentioned at the end of the segment, "Woo, we need critical race theory." And you might be wondering, what does critical race theory have to do with all this stuff? That Joy Reid is saying we need critical race theory because Kyle Rittenhouse showed up at a protest, protected businesses, and killed two people who were trying to harm him and did harm him, and shot one other person who admitted on the stand that Kyle didn't shoot until he fired his gun. So why would they say that you need critical race theory? Because critical race theory isn't about any sort of historical accuracy. It's not about justice. It's not about fairness. Critical race theory is about remaking the world in their image. Critical race theory theorists embrace subjectivity of perspective and are avowedly political. And that's in Words That Wound, critical race theory, critical race theory book. One of the writers on it is Kimberly Crenshaw, who's one of the considered founders of it, who's been on Joy Reid's show a lot of times. So if people trying to convince you that critical race theory is about accurate history, that they just want to teach your kids accurate history. No, the people who made it admit that it is not about being subjective in any sense of the matter. As a matter of fact, if you guys recall that whiteness document that I showed you, the traits of whiteness, objective linear thinking, that is a trait of whiteness. Those are things that they reject. They reject those things. Isn't that crazy? Being an objective linear critical thinker, those are whiteness. And there's other critical race theory writings where they reject those sort of things, particularly how they wanted to reconstruct academia, because they do consider those qualities to be whiteness qualities. So there are other qualities that they think are actually more positive toward racial attributes that they want to uplift. Objectivity bad, subjectivity good. Again, critical race theorists embrace subjectivity of perspective and are avowedly political. So when these people get on TV shows and they talk about these things and they push things, and you hear the superintendent at the Detroit Public Schools saying, yeah, it's in our stuff. We're putting it in our curriculum. It's in your social studies. We're putting it in other places with your kids reading and so on. You have to remember that they're not trying to be honest with your kids. They're trying to indoctrinate them because they have a particular worldview. So it did not matter what the facts of the case were with Kyle Rittenhouse. It didn't matter that there was a ton of evidence, so much video that saved this kid's life. Save this kid's life, well, at least the rest of his life, because he would have spent it the rest of his life in prison. But there was so much video around, drone footage, people with their cameras, people who were like on the field reporters, independent reporters, getting this information out there from every which angle. This kid was obviously assaulted by these people. He was in reasonable fear of his life, and he pulled the trigger. But that doesn't matter to these people. Joy Reid said, other people said, we're not surprised by this outcome. They're not surprised because it was the correct outcome, but they still say things like, well, the Second Amendment or these the idea that you can protect your property, that goes back to slave masters trying to protect their property, using violence to protect their property. That's not really why we have the Second Amendment. But you can protect your property, sure, and you can protect your life. He didn't pull the trigger to protect other people's property. He pulled the trigger to protect his life, to preserve his life. So even that narrative is ridiculous. But the same Constitution, the same sort of rights that applied to Kyle also applied to other people. There was a man, Mr. Coffee, black guy. He got off on self-defense. He was not charged for murder because he also got off on self-defense. So the same time Rittenhouse did. So the same rules that applied to Rittenhouse applied to him and would apply to me. And a lot of people were very concerned about this case because they're like, if they damage the Second Amendment or self-defense in any sort of way, this could have terrible repercussions. But they don't care about the harm it will cause because they have a utopia goal in mind of reshaping the world. They want to deconstruct it and they want to reconstruct it. So Joy Reid doesn't care that I care about the Second Amendment, that it applies to me. As a matter of fact, critical race theory people, they reject that there is some kind of neutrality. They think America is too corrupt to just go along with this idea that we can have color blindness and that the laws, even if they're neutral, that they can apply to people in the same sort of way. And I put this in the article that I wrote, that I dropped today. Even if they don't apply in the exact same way, they work for me more often than they don't. So I'm just not willing to rip up the entire Constitution because you have some kind of communist fever dream. Again, the facts did not matter to Kyle Rittenhouse. Nicole Hannah-Jones, she's the one who's behind, she wasn't like the only person behind the 1619 Project, but she got a Pulitzer Prize for it. And the 1619 Project was trying to revamp the idea of America that was founded and rooted in slavery, not freedom, not trying to be separate from the British, not all the stuff in this Declaration of Independence, that our true founding was the day that the slave ships came ashore. That's what they're trying to reconstruct America as, the idea of America. So historians have disputed this, but they're still pushing it, and they gave themselves Pulitzer Prizes so they can continue, so they can push it and have legitimacy to your kids to have this attitude. She tweeted out stuff about Rittenhouse that were untrue, about him crossing state lines with a gun, that weren't true. And she's like, "Oh, but y'all believe in law and order?" Yeah, we do believe in law and order, and he didn't break the darn law. But here's a journalist still spreading misinformation. This was after the verdict. Cori Bush, she's a congressperson. She said it was white supremacy. Colin Kaepernick, he said, "We witnessed a system that was built on white supremacy validate the terroristic acts of white supremacy." And he goes further. He says, "It cannot be reformed. We have to tear the system down. We have to abolish it." Again, the case had nothing to do with race. Kyle's not a white supremacist. And even if he were, he was still within his right to protect his life. These people act like he went down and hunted black men. Everyone he shot was white. Thank God he didn't kill Jump Kick Man, because he was black. He still would have been justified, but man, they would have really went crazy on Kyle if they could actually say he killed a black person. But that didn't matter for some news organizations, because it says on here in the Independent that he killed 3 black men, or shot 3 black men. That's a newspaper. So all these people are talking about tearing down the system. And this is all reading that's consistent with the just reforming the world, deconstructing it and reconstructing it in their image. When people talk about critical race theory, it is not about being honest. It is not about being honest with the world. And here's another example. Stephen Colbert, and I'm going to start wrapping this up, but Stephen Colbert had this to say.
Big news on Friday was that after being accused of crossing state lines, killing 2 people, and wounding another last year during a Black Lives Matter protest, Kyle Rittenhouse was acquitted on all counts. Okay. Yeah, okay, cards on the table. I'm not a legal expert, so I can't tell you whether or not Kyle Rittenhouse broke the law. But I can tell you this. If he didn't break the law, we should change the law. Big news.
So I don't know if he did anything wrong legally, but you know what? I don't like what he did, so we need to change the law. Change what law? What did he do wrong? You're gonna say that no one under 18 can carry a gun? Because he was just a stone throws away. Maybe you don't feel like someone under 17 should have had a gun. I guess that would have stopped him from carrying, but he did know his rights, and that's why he had an AR, because he was allowed to carry that. He wouldn't have been allowed to carry a pistol like that. So he knew the law. And if he did know the law, and he wasn't allowed to carry, I guess he wouldn't have been there, and that would have stopped him from being there, but that wouldn't have stopped other people from trying to protect their property and getting beaten down and other things. There was an old man there trying to protect his property. He was 71. They broke his jaw. So there's still going to be people out there who want to protect their stuff. Even if it's a right that you guys deem as worthy, and you still want to call it a protest. So we should still keep guns and be able to protect our stuff and protect our lives. So what is it that they think is so wrong that they know that Kyle didn't do anything legally wrong, but they still want to change the law? The last thing I want to mention, and again, please go to the blacktnews.com, check out the article that I wrote on this, because it does have sources and other things, and quite a bit of quotes from critical race theory that will piece this all together. But at first, Joe Biden was like, we got to trust the jury. Kamala Harris came out and said, the verdict speaks for itself, and we have a long ways to go. And you guys know I've been trying to make the justice system equitable, which is hilarious because that's not true. She's done some pretty shady things as a prosecutor. But equity, she said, she's been fighting to make the justice system more equitable. Equity isn't about fairness. It isn't about justice. Equity is why you have cases like Darrell Brooks, who drove that SVU through the parade crowd, because people want bail reform, because too many Black people are disproportionately impacted by it. So they want to do bail reform because they just don't like the numbers, and they don't like the numbers, like, oh, there's too many brown people affected by it. But so they start changing stuff. It doesn't matter if they're guilty and they need to be in jail. It doesn't matter about those things. They just want to adjust the system because they don't think that it's equitable. So he gets off on $1,000 bond, and then he goes off and he does what he does. Crime is up so many different places because of equity, because of this justice reform that they keep talking about. It doesn't matter that it's hurting people. It matters to some people. Hopefully we've seen people push back against the defund the police stuff. But we need to crack down on more of these left-wing, George Soros, in a lot of cases, funded prosecutors who are talking about justice reform, that make these bad decisions, that allow criminals to go back in the streets and do what Mr. Brooks did. Obviously not always to that degree, but crime is up. Crime is up. So when people talk about equity, no one is talking about making your life better. That just means they want to adjust the games, the rules, however, to get the outcome that they want on paper. That's why people are taking away standards in school for math and science and SAT scores and whatnot to get the sort of numbers that they want along racial lines. Doesn't matter what's fair. Doesn't matter if it hurts your kid. They'll segregate them if they have to, but they do not like an equal platform. They don't say equality, they say equity. And then Joe Biden released a statement and said, I know people are sad and angry about this. I am too. He's like, myself included. Well, why are you upset, Joe Biden? The facts were that Kyle was innocent of the crime. So why are you upset? Are you upset that it ever happened? Okay, but people like you and Kamala Harris egged it on. And you bear a huge responsibility for what happened. They know this stuff is bad. I doubt Joe Biden knows deeply about critical race theory, but he's around all these crazy people who are pushing this sort of stuff. And they're willing to go along with it despite the harm it can do to our country. So if you guys are really upset about how the media pushed the Rittenhouse case, it's just really the tip of the iceberg. This was a high-profile case, and a lot of people were really invested in it. But it's really the tip of the iceberg. There's tons of instances where it's happening in other places, in corporate America, in your kids' cartoons or TV shows, schools, and so on. So this was a blatant example where you see people really showing their colors. But it's been going on for a long time, and it's been coming out to the forefront now because a lot of dedicated patriots and activists who are talking about this, who are getting educated on the issue, but they've infiltrated things for a long time. And that's why you have these crazy people with the chip on the shoulder who really feel that they are entitled to burn yourself down because that's what they deem is justice. Obviously not legal justice because, that's also a sign of whiteness, our idea of justice in America. But it's social justice. It's social justice. So again, please go to blacktnews.com, check out that article, please share it around, send it to your friends, your neighbors, your school board people running for stuff, send it to everybody. Because people need to know what this really looks like and what sort of repercussions it's going to have for the rest of the country. Anyway, I do have to go. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. Please go to blacktnews.com and check out this stuff, and consider leaving a donation on blacktnews.com's website. If you enjoy what I do, the sort of things that I cover, and you like staying up to date and informed, consider leaving a donation at blacktnews.com/donate. I appreciate all that you guys are doing. Make sure that you're sharing, that you're liking, that you're suggesting other people to watch Black Teen News. Please check out different merchandise that I have on the website at Black Teen News. We have, like I talked about abortion for a little bit, my money, my business. I made that shirt because I'm sick of people saying it's not your business when people are literally trying to take your tax dollars and pay for it. The government literally paid for fetuses so they could have humanized mice experiments. So darn right it is your business. It's everybody's business. And I can go deeper into that, but that shirt's available. We got the You Are Not Those Special mugs, and we got those in shirts. Constitution is Glorious Liberty document. We also got black tea mugs and some stuff with the logo on it as well. So please check out that stuff on blacktnews.com. Thank you guys so much for joining me today, and I will see you guys tomorrow.